My family laughed when Grandpa left me an envelope. They didn't know it contained a $1.2 billion empire. Hello, everyone. My name is Cassandra Kelly. I'm 26 years old. My grandfather's funeral was supposed to honor the man who built our family's fortune. Instead, it became the most humiliating day of my life. While my relatives calmly divided his empire like vultures circling an inheritance, I was handed a single envelope. Inside it was nothing more than a plane ticket. That was it. No property, no business, no millions, just an envelope. The reading of my grandfather, William Kelly's will, took place in his attorney's downtown office, a heavy room lined with dark mahogany panels and shelves of legal books. My mother, Margaret Kelly, sat in a black Chanel suit, pretending to dab tears that never actually came. My father, Michael Kelly, kept glancing at his Rolex, already calculating how he would spend his inheritance. My brother, Ryan Kelly, leaned back in his chair with the confidence of someone who assumed everything in that room belonged to him. And my cousin, Olivia Parker, whispered numbers to her husband like she was already counting her winnings. At the head of the table sat Mr. Harrison, my grandfather's attorney of 30 years. He cleared his throat and began reading. To my son, Michael Kelly, I leave the family shipping company, Pacific Horizon Shipping, including all associated assets. My father's face lit up instantly. The company alone was worth around $30 million. To my daughter-in-law, Margaret Kelly, I leave the estate in Sonoma Valley, including all furnishings and artwork. My mother smiled for the first time that day. The estate was easily worth $25 million. To my grandson, Ryan Kelly, I leave my collection of vintage automobiles and the penthouse apartment in Miami's Brickell district. Ryan quietly pumped his fist under the table. Those cars alone were worth millions. To my granddaughter, Olivia Parker, I leave my yacht, Legacy, and the vacation villa in Palm Beach. Olivia squeezed her husband's hand in triumph. Then the attorney paused, and slowly, he looked directly at me. To my granddaughter, Cassandra Kelly, I leave this envelope. That was it. An envelope. For a moment, the room was silent. Then the laughter started. My mother chuckled and patted my knee in a patronizing gesture. Well, sweetheart, I'm sure there's something sentimental inside. Perhaps a letter. But I could read the expressions around the table. To them, it was hilarious. Poor Cassandra, the granddaughter who had spent every summer helping Grandpa with his projects, listening to his business stories, thinking she mattered. And all she received was a simple envelope, while everyone else walked away with millions. My mother even tried to pronounce a phrase in Portuguese to sound sophisticated, though she butchered it badly. Then she added, with a thin smile, I suppose your grandfather didn't love you quite as much as you thought. The words landed like a punch to the chest. 26 years of family holidays. 26 years of being the dependable one, the helpful one. And this was how they saw me, an afterthought, the leftover piece nobody wanted. Ryan leaned toward me with a smirk. Maybe it's Monopoly money, Cass. That would fit your luck. I gripped the envelope tightly. My hands trembled slightly. I could feel something inside besides paper. It wasn't thick enough to be a check, but there was definitely more than a letter. Across the table, Olivia added sweetly, Don't look so disappointed. I'm sure Grandpa left you something appropriate for your position. Her tone made it very clear what she believed my position was. I pushed back my chair. The leather scraped loudly across the floor. If you'll excuse me, I said quietly. I need some air. Their laughter followed me down the hallway. I could hear my mother telling someone behind me, She's always been dramatic. William probably left her a little keepsake, someone else said. Or advice about finding a husband. Inside the elevator, alone except for my reflection in the polished steel doors, I finally opened the envelope. Inside was a first-class plane ticket to Monaco, scheduled for the following week. Beneath it was a small card written in my grandfather's unmistakable handwriting. Trust activated on your 26th birthday, sweetheart. Time to claim what has always been yours. But that wasn't the part that made my breath catch. There was something else in the envelope. A business card and a bank statement. The card read, Sebastian Whitmore, President, Whitmore Capital. On the back, in my grandfather's handwriting, were 4 simple words. He manages your trust. My eyes moved to the bank statement. It came from a private Swiss account under the name Kelly Global Legacy Trust. The balance made the room spin. $347 million. $347 million. I stared at the number, counting the zeros again and again, convinced my eyes were playing tricks on me. My hands shook so badly, I nearly dropped the paper. This had to be a mistake, a clerical error, some kind of cruel joke. But the bank letterhead was genuine. The account numbers looked legitimate, and the handwriting on the card was unmistakably my grandfather's. When I returned to my small apartment that evening, I called the international number listed on the statement. After several transfers and a long series of identity checks, a Swiss banker with flawless English finally confirmed what I still could not believe. Yes, Miss Kelly, he said calmly. The Kelly Global Legacy Trust was established when you were 16 and has been professionally managed for the past decade. Your grandfather specified that the trust would activate on your 26th birthday. I never signed anything, I said. That was not required. Your grandfather created the trust as the settler while you were a minor. And the assets? The trust has been generating returns from multiple international holdings for several years. International holdings? The phrase sent a chill through me. I suddenly remembered all those long chess games with my grandfather, the way he would casually ask my opinion about hotel management, customer service strategies, or business expansion. I had always assumed he was just making conversation. What kind of holdings? I asked. I'm not authorized to discuss details over the phone, the banker replied politely. However, Mr. Sebastian Whitmore has been fully briefed. He will provide a complete overview of your assets when you arrive in Monaco. After the call ended, I sat alone in my tiny apartment, staring down at the bank statement in my hands. $347 million. And somehow I had the feeling that was only the beginning. The family group chat exploded with messages that evening. Photos, links, excited updates about everyone's new fortunes. Ryan had already posted pictures of vintage car auctions and glossy auto magazines. Olivia was scrolling through luxury listings for beachfront homes in Palm Beach, talking about renovations before she had even seen the property in person. Not one person asked what was inside my envelope. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with my parents for breakfast and made the mistake of mentioning my plan. I'm thinking about taking that trip to Monaco, I said casually. The ticket Grandpa left me. My father nearly choked on his coffee. Monaco? Michael Kelly looked at me like I had suggested flying to the moon. Honey, that kind of trip costs thousands. Hotels, restaurants, transportation. Your teaching salary can't support something like that. I felt the bank statement tucked safely inside my purse. The ticket is first class, I replied quietly, and it's already paid for. My mother laughed with open disbelief. Cassandra, sweetheart, Monaco is for people with real money, Margaret Kelly said, waving her hand dismissively. You would be completely out of place. It's casinos, yachts, designer stores, people worth hundreds of millions. If only she knew. Ryan smirked from across the table. Maybe she can take some photos for Instagram, he said. Show her students what real wealth looks like before she goes back to her little classroom. My cheeks burned, but beneath the embarrassment, something else had started to grow. A quiet certainty, knowledge, power. For the first time in my life, I knew something they didn't. Maybe Grandpa had a reason for sending me there, I said softly. My mother sighed with theatrical patience. Your grandfather was 93, Cassandra. His mind wasn't exactly sharp toward the end. But I remembered those conversations very differently. Grandpa had been completely clear-headed. Even in his final weeks, he talked about investments, business deals, and global markets. When he mentioned Monaco or international casinos, it was never like someone imagining a place he had seen in a movie. It sounded like someone who actually knew those worlds. That afternoon, I called in sick to work and spent hours researching. Sebastian Whitmore, the man whose name was printed on the card in my envelope, was very real. Financial journals described him as the president of Whitmore Capital, a firm that managed billions of dollars in global investments for ultra-wealthy families. Apparently, I was now one of those families. The night before my flight, I packed the best dresses I owned and tried to gather every ounce of confidence I had. My mother called one last time. "Cassandra, this is a mistake," she insisted. "You could sell the ticket or exchange it for something practical." "The ticket isn't refundable, Mom." She hesitated before replying, her voice tightening. "Well, then at least promise me you won't embarrass yourself. Don't go around telling people you're William Kelly's granddaughter expecting special treatment." I ended the call without making any promises. As I zipped up my suitcase, I caught my reflection in the mirror. 26 years old. Brown hair, average height, nothing extraordinary, according to my family. But Grandpa had always said something different. He told me I had his instincts for business, his stubborn determination, his ability to see opportunities others missed. Tomorrow, I would find out whether he had been right. The first-class cabin on the Air France flight to Monaco felt like another world. The flight attendant greeted me warmly as Miss Kelly, offered champagne before takeoff, and made sure I had everything I needed for the 11-hour journey. As the plane crossed the Atlantic, I stared out the window and tried to understand what the numbers on that bank statement actually meant. $347 million was not just money. It was freedom, security, power. It meant never worrying about rent, student loans, or bills again. When the plane landed at Nice Côte d'Azur Airport, I expected to grab a taxi for the short drive into Monaco. Instead, as I rolled my suitcase through customs, I noticed a man in a sharp black suit holding a sign with my name. Not simply Cassandra Kelly. The sign read, Miss Cassandra Kelly, Beneficiary, Kelly Global Legacy Trust. My legs nearly gave out. The driver greeted me politely and loaded my luggage into a spotless black Mercedes. As we pulled onto the coastal highway, the Mediterranean stretching endlessly beside us, he began making polite conversation. "Is this your first visit to the Principality, Miss Kelly?" he asked in lightly accented English. "Yes," I managed. "It's beautiful." He smiled slightly. "Mr. Sebastian Whitmore is looking forward to meeting you. He has personally overseen the Monaco holdings within your trust for several years." Holdings. Plural. Monaco revealed itself slowly as we drove along the coastline. First, the harbor appeared, crowded with yachts larger than most houses. Then the famous casino buildings of Monte Carlo rose into view, glowing gold in the afternoon sunlight. Finally, the car climbed narrow streets lined with luxury boutiques and quiet cafes. At the top of the hill stood a palace complex I had only seen in magazines. But we didn't stop at the main entrance. Instead, the driver guided the Mercedes through a private gate into a secluded courtyard. "Miss Kelly?" he said, stepping out to open my door. "If you would follow me." We walked through long corridors filled with paintings that belonged in museums. My modest teacher's salary had never prepared me for places like this. Everything around me spoke of old wealth, deep influence, and centuries of power. Eventually, we stopped before a heavy carved door. The driver knocked twice, then opened it. "Miss Kelly," he announced, "your appointment." I stepped inside an office so large it could have swallowed my entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Mediterranean, sunlight flooding the room. Behind an enormous desk sat a man who looked exactly like the photographs I had seen online. Sebastian Whitmore, president of Whitmore Capital. He stood as I stepped into the room and walked around the desk to greet me. Sebastian Whitmore was tall, impeccably dressed in a navy suit, carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had never needed to prove himself to anyone. "Miss Kelly," he said, extending his hand. His voice carried a soft European accent, smooth and measured. "I'm Sebastian Whitmore. Thank you for coming." I shook his hand, suddenly aware of how out of place I must look in a world like this. "Mr. Whitmore, I have a lot of questions." He smiled politely. "Please, call me Sebastian, and I assure you, I have many answers." He gestured for me to sit in one of the leather chairs across from his desk. "Your grandfather, William Kelly, was not only a close friend," he continued. "He was one of the most strategic investors I've ever worked with." He opened a thick folder filled with documents. "Miss Kelly, your grandfather began planning your financial future when you were still very young. When you turned 16, he established the Kelly Global Legacy Trust with very precise instructions regarding your education, both academic and practical." Practical education. The words immediately brought back memories. All those long chess games with Grandpa, the way he would ask my opinion about business ideas, customer service strategies, or how hotels should treat their guests. Sebastian watched my expression carefully. "He wasn't simply telling you stories, Cassandra," he said. "He was teaching you." He turned a page in the folder. "Your trust currently holds controlling interests in several major properties. The Riviera Crown Resort and Casino here in Monaco generates approximately $50 million in annual revenue. Your holdings also include the Imperial Harbor Casino Resort in Macau, producing around $160 million annually, along with commercial real estate portfolios in London, Tokyo, and Sydney." I stared at him, unable to speak. He continued calmly. "Your grandfather also ensured that all tax obligations were properly structured through the trust. Over the years, you have been receiving a modest annual stipend of around $60,000, enough for you to live comfortably as a teacher, but not enough to draw attention." Suddenly, everything started to make sense. Why I had always been able to afford my apartment despite my salary. Why I had never struggled with money the way my colleagues did. Why Grandpa had always seemed so confident whenever I worried about my future. That money had been coming from the trust all along. I swallowed and asked the question that had been building in my mind since I arrived. "Sebastian, how much am I actually worth?" He glanced at another document before answering. "As of this morning, the net value of the Kelly Global Legacy Trust is approximately $1.2 billion. My fingers tightened around the arms of the chair to keep myself steady. "You're telling me I'm a billionaire?" Sebastian nodded gently. "You always have been, Cassandra. The trust simply hadn't been activated yet." I spent the rest of the afternoon in his office reviewing documents that confirmed everything he had said. Trust agreements, property deeds, investment reports, tax filings. Entire teams of professionals had been managing assets around the world on behalf of a trust I never even knew existed. As I flipped through the pages, Sebastian explained the final piece of the puzzle. Your grandfather was extremely deliberate about the timing, he said. He wanted you to live a normal life first, to understand work, responsibility, and independence before learning the truth about your inheritance. I looked up from the documents. But why hide it? Why not just tell me? Sebastian gave a small, knowing smile. Because he knew your family. I immediately thought about the will reading, the laughter, my mother's cruel comment. Sebastian continued. He believed that if your relatives understood the true scale of your inheritance, they would treat you differently. Some might resent you. Others might try to control you. Many would see you only as a source of money rather than as a person. The truth of those words settled heavily in my chest. Your grandfather wanted you to see who truly valued you before you gained the power to change the entire dynamic, Sebastian said. Now the decision is yours. You decide what to do with what has always belonged to you. That evening, Sebastian arranged a tour of one of my properties, the Riviera Crown Resort and Casino. The general manager, Etienne Laurent, greeted me in the lobby and guided me through the building. I had to keep reminding myself that I wasn't there as a tourist. I was the owner. The resort was breathtaking. 300 luxury suites, 5 restaurants, a sprawling casino floor alive with activity, and a spa that looked like something from a luxury magazine. From the terrace of the presidential suite, Etienne pointed out the harbor below. Our occupancy rate has remained above 94% for the past 3 years, he explained proudly. Your grandfather, or rather your trust, has always been an excellent owner. Very hands-off, but supportive when improvements were needed. My grandfather handled all of this remotely? I asked. Yes, through regular video conferences with our advisory board. His understanding of hospitality operations was remarkable. Suddenly I understood something. Grandpa hadn't learned about hospitality randomly. He had learned through me. Those endless conversations about customer service, about how guests should feel welcomed, about balancing luxury with comfort. He had been listening to my perspective as someone who understood what ordinary people wanted from extraordinary experiences. Later that night, back in my 5-star hotel suite, I checked my phone. The family group chat was still exploding with excitement about their inheritances. Ryan was talking about buying a condo in Miami. Olivia had announced she was quitting her job to become a full-time lifestyle influencer. I almost laughed. They were celebrating millions, and I owned billions. But the realization that stayed with me wasn't about the money. It was about protection. Grandpa had shielded me. While everyone else received instant gratification, he had given me something far more valuable. The chance to discover my own strength before I ever needed to use it. Just then, my phone buzzed with a message from my father. How's the vacation going? Hope you're not spending too much money. I looked around the presidential suite, the harbor stretching endlessly beyond the windows. A bottle of champagne sat on the table beside me, the kind that probably cost more than my father's monthly car payment. It's educational, I texted back. The next morning, Sebastian Whitmore arranged for the company jet to take me to Macau. As I settled into the soft leather seat of an airplane that apparently belonged to my trust, I stared out the window and tried to decide what to do with this knowledge. I could return home immediately and reveal everything. I could shock my family with the truth and watch their expressions when they realized how badly they had underestimated me. Or I could be patient. Grandpa had always said the best players think several moves ahead. As the jet lifted into the bright sky above Monaco, I made my decision. It was time to play chess. The Imperial Harbor Casino Resort in Macau was even more impressive than anything I had seen in Monaco. The building rose 47 floors into the skyline, a towering wall of gold and glass overlooking the harbor like a monument to wealth. My monument, apparently. At the airport, I was greeted by Natalie Brooks, the resort's chief operating officer. She arrived in a sleek limousine that would have made my entire family stare in disbelief. Natalie was sharp, confident, and completely unaware that she was speaking to the actual owner of the property. "Miss Kelly," she said as we settled into the back seat, "your trust's representative mentioned that you wanted a full tour of the resort. I'm excited to show you what we've built here." "How long have you been managing the property?" I asked. 7 years, she replied. "It's been incredible watching it grow. Your trust has always been an excellent owner, supportive of innovation, but careful with risk." As she guided me through the resort, she showed me financial reports that made my head spin. The casino floor generated nearly 60% of the revenue. The hotel suites, restaurants, and entertainment venues made up the rest. Every department was operating efficiently, and profits were steadily rising. "Your trust has been considering expansion," Natalie added as we sat in the penthouse suite that technically belonged to me. "There's interest in acquiring similar properties in Dubai and Singapore." "Really?" I said, trying to sound casual. "What kind of timeline are we talking about?" "Nothing finalized yet, but the research looks promising. Your financial team seems confident about the international market." My financial team. I had a financial team. Later that afternoon, I spent nearly 3 hours on video calls with advisors I had never even met before. Yet these people had been managing my wealth for years. My CPA, who had quietly filed my taxes and maintained the illusion that I was simply a teacher receiving small trust distributions. My investment manager, who had grown the portfolio from hundreds of millions to well over $1 billion. My legal team, who had structured the entire trust system to withstand scrutiny while protecting my privacy. One of the senior advisors leaned toward his camera during the call. "Miss Kelly, your grandfather left very specific instructions for the moment you discovered your inheritance. He believed you might want to make some significant moves once you understood your position." "What kind of moves?" I asked. "Strategic acquisitions," he said, "particularly in industries where you already have personal knowledge or family connections." Family connections. The idea came to me almost instantly. That evening, I had dinner with Natalie at one of the resort's most exclusive restaurants. As we ate food that cost more per bite than I used to spend on an entire meal, I casually steered the conversation toward business acquisitions. "Hypothetically," I said, "if someone wanted to purchase a small shipping company worth about $40 million, how difficult would that be?" Natalie raised an eyebrow. "$40 million is practically pocket change for a trust of your size," she said. "We could structure the acquisition through one of your existing corporate entities and close the deal within a month." She paused. "Is this hypothetical company interesting for some reason?" I thought about my father's business, Pacific Horizon Shipping. I knew the company had been struggling with debt ever since the recent expansion. A large cash offer could solve all of his problems, and it could also give me control of the company I had heard about my entire life. "It might be," I said carefully. Later that night, I called Sebastian Whitmore and explained my idea. "You want to acquire your father's company?" he asked after listening quietly. "I want to save it," I replied. The expansion put a lot of pressure on their finances. My dad would never ask for help. But if a strong investor appeared with the right offer, and you believe you're the right investor, I believe I'm the only one who actually cares about the employees and the company culture my father built. Sebastian was silent for a moment. "Cassandra," he said thoughtfully, "this would be your first major decision as a billionaire. Are you sure you want your family involved?" "They won't know it's me," I said. "To them, it will just look like a generous offer from international investors. And you're comfortable with that level of secrecy." I remembered the laughter in the lawyer's office. the smirks, the assumption that I was the least important person in the room. "For now," I said quietly. "Yes." The next morning, I flew back to San Diego with a plan. I would give my family one more chance to see me for who I really was. If they still chose to underestimate me, then they would learn exactly what that mistake would cost. Back in my small apartment, I sat at my kitchen table reviewing financial reports from properties scattered across 3 continents. Meanwhile, my family remained completely unaware of the person I had become. The contrast felt almost surreal. That very morning, I had been on a video call with my Dubai acquisition team, discussing a resort purchase that would cost more than my entire family's combined inheritance. That evening, I was getting ready for dinner at my parents' house in San Diego, fully expecting the usual questions about whether I had spent too much money on my vacation. My mother had even asked me to bring my laptop. According to her, I was good with computers and could help organize some basic paperwork related to everyone's inheritances. If only she knew the kind of financial planning I had been doing lately. Earlier that afternoon, my lawyers had finished drafting the first version of a potential acquisition offer for Pacific Horizon Shipping, my father's company. The research report they sent me was troubling. The business itself was profitable, but the recent fleet expansion had buried the company under heavy debt. Cash flow was tight, and the balance sheet was dangerously leveraged. A determined buyer with enough capital could easily force a sale. My phone rang. It was Natalie Brooks, calling from Macau. "Cassandra," she said, getting straight to the point, "the analysis on Pacific Horizon Shipping is complete. The company is exactly what you described. Strong revenue, but financially strained." "Can our offer fix that?" I asked. "Immediately," she replied. "A capital injection would stabilize the company and give you a solid regional shipping operation. It's actually a very attractive acquisition." "What kind of timeline are we talking about?" "We can present an offer next week. Anonymous, of course, through one of your existing holding entities. Clean transaction, generous terms, no visible connection to you." She paused before adding one more detail. "And honestly, Cassandra, they probably won't have much choice. If the company doesn't secure new capital within 6 months, they'll either have to sell assets or take on even more debt." After the call ended, I stood by my apartment window and looked toward the neighborhood where my parents lived. Part of me felt guilty about what I was planning, but another part remembered every family gathering where I had been ignored. Every moment someone assumed I was too naive to understand business. Every time I had been treated like the family charity case. That evening, when I arrived at my parents' house, everyone was already there. Ryan sat on the couch, scrolling through luxury car websites on his tablet. Olivia was showing my mother photos of renovation ideas for the Palm Beach villa she had inherited. My father, Michael Kelly, sat at the dining table reading financial news, probably searching for investment strategies for the $30 million he had just received. "Cassandra!" Olivia called when she saw me. "There's our world traveler. How was Monaco? Did you take lots of pictures?" "It was educational," I replied calmly, taking my usual seat at the dining table. Ryan didn't even look up from his tablet. "I still can't believe you actually went," he said. "That place is for people with serious money. Must have been awkward being surrounded by all those millionaires." "You get used to it," I said lightly. My father raised his wine glass. "Well, let's toast to William Kelly's legacy," he announced. "He certainly took care of this family." Everyone lifted their glasses. Everyone except me. I sat quietly, hands folded on the table, watching them celebrate inheritances that were only a fraction of what I now controlled. "Cassandra?" my mother prompted. "Your glass." "I'm fine," I said. "Someone should stay clear-headed for the administrative work." "Good thinking," my father said approvingly. "Always practical." As dinner continued, the conversation drifted through everyone's new plans. Ryan talked about the sports cars he wanted to buy. Olivia described quitting her job to become a full-time influencer. My mother discussed renovations for the Sonoma Valley estate. I studied them carefully. They weren't cruel people. They simply had never truly seen me. They had built their entire perception of me from incomplete information. The real question was, what would happen once that information changed? During dessert, my father began discussing his business. "The shipping company is doing very well," he said confidently. "Your grandfather's investment in the new vessels positioned us perfectly for growth. We're already looking at expanding routes, maybe acquiring smaller competitors." "How's the cash flow?" I asked casually. My father blinked in surprise. "Well, manageable," he said slowly. "We took on some debt for the expansion, but revenue projections look strong." "What about working capital reserves for unexpected expenses?" The room fell silent. Everyone stared at me. My mother laughed. "Cassandra, you don't need to worry about business matters. That's your father's area of expertise." "I'm just curious," I said calmly. "Grandpa always said cash flow was the most important metric for any company." "We're fine," my father replied quickly, though I noticed the tension in his jaw. But I had already seen the financial reports. They weren't fine. The company was operating month to month. One lost contract could push it into serious trouble. After dinner, while I helped clear the dishes, my mother pulled me aside in the kitchen. "Honey," she said gently, "I know you want to be involved, but you don't need to ask your father difficult questions about his business. That really isn't your field." I almost laughed. Not my field. I owned companies that generated more profit in a month than Pacific Horizon Shipping made in an entire year. "Of course, Mom," I said politely. "I was just making conversation." "I know," she replied, smiling, "but leave business discussions to the business people." Later that night, as I drove back to my apartment, I made a phone call. "Present the offer Monday morning," I told my acquisition team. "Generous terms, fast closing, all cash." "And if they ask who the buyer is?" one of the lawyers asked. I smiled as I parked outside my building. "Tell them the investors prefer to remain private," I said. "But they're very interested in supporting American maritime businesses." It wasn't exactly a lie. Have you ever been in a situation where your family completely underestimated you? Tell me about it in the comments below, because what happened next changed everything. The offer arrived on Tuesday morning. I was in the teacher's lounge at school during lunch when my phone rang. My father's name flashed across the screen. His voice sounded tense. "Cassandra," he said. "Something strange just happened. Pacific Horizon Shipping received a buyout offer this morning from some international investment group, completely out of nowhere." I forced concern into my voice. "Is that good or bad?" "I honestly don't know," my father admitted. I could hear papers rustling on his end of the line. "The offer is very strong, almost too strong. I just don't understand why they're interested in us. We're not that large in the global shipping industry." "What does your lawyer think?" I asked. "That's the strange part. They want an answer by Friday. Investors don't usually move this fast unless they're serious." "Maybe they see potential you don't," I said innocently. "Maybe," he replied after a pause. "Listen, can you come to dinner Thursday night? I want the whole family there. You've always been good with details, and I could use another perspective." Another perspective. If only he knew whose perspective he was asking for. Thursday's dinner felt completely different from the week before. The atmosphere was tense, focused. My father had spread financial documents across the dining table, as if preparing for a military briefing. "The offer is $45 million, he announced once we were all seated. "That's about 30% above the company's book value." Ryan finally looked up from his phone. 45 million? That's insane! Take it! It's not that simple, my father replied. If I sell the company, what do I do afterward? I've spent 30 years building it. You retire, Olivia Parker suggested with a shrug. Travel, relax, enjoy the money. I'm 58, my father said quietly. Too young to retire, too old to start over. While they talked, I studied the acquisition proposal carefully. The terms were exactly what I had instructed my lawyers to write. Generous enough to attract serious consideration, structured to solve the company's debt problem, but not so excessive that it would raise suspicion. Who exactly is making the offer? I asked, pointing to the letterhead. My father adjusted his glasses. Aurora Strategic Holdings, Swiss-based investment group. Our lawyers say they're very legitimate. They specialize in maritime and logistics acquisitions. I kept reading. What about their integration timeline? I asked. Employee retention policies? Management restructuring? Everyone looked at me again. My mother tilted her head. Cassandra, those are very specific questions for someone who doesn't work in business. Grandpa always said you should read the fine print, I replied calmly, still studying the document. Actually, these terms are very favorable. They're guaranteeing employee retention for at least 3 years, keeping the current management team and preserving operational independence. Ryan narrowed his eyes slightly. How do you even know what qualifies as a good deal? I shrugged. I read financial news sometimes. Business strategy can be interesting when you look at it analytically. My father watched me with a thoughtful expression. Cassandra, you're asking better questions than my attorney did. Maybe I inherited more of Grandpa's instincts than people realized, I said lightly. The conversation continued for nearly an hour. I could see the conflict building in my father's face. He wanted someone to tell him not to sell. He wanted reassurance that holding on to the company was the right decision. But the numbers told a different story. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. I think I have to accept the offer, he said quietly. It's simply too much money to ignore. And honestly, the stress of managing cash flow lately has been keeping me awake at night. Are you sure? My mother asked. The offer expires Friday at 5, he replied. If I walk away from this, I might never see an opportunity like it again. After dinner, I stayed in the kitchen helping my mother wash dishes while the others moved into the living room. Your father seems relieved, she said softly. I think the company has been weighing on him more than he admits. Sometimes selling at the right moment is the smartest business decision, I replied carefully as I dried a wine glass. She studied me for a moment. You were surprisingly insightful tonight. Those were very mature questions. I nearly dropped the glass. You think so? Well, maybe not immediately, she said thoughtfully. But perhaps one day you could move into business. You've always been intelligent, Cassandra. Maybe even too intelligent for elementary school teaching. I hid my reaction behind a neutral smile. This from the same woman who had laughed at my inheritance 2 weeks earlier. I'll think about it, I said. Friday afternoon at 4:47 p.m., my father signed the documents. By 5:15 p.m., he owned $45 million, and he no longer owned Pacific Horizon Shipping. By 5:30 p.m., I owned the company my father had just sold. I celebrated quietly in my apartment while my phone rang. It was Natalie Brooks calling from Macau. The paperwork is complete, she said. Pacific Horizon Shipping is now a subsidiary of Aurora Strategic Holdings, which is controlled by your trust. What are your operational plans? She asked. Nothing changes, I said immediately. Same employees, same management, same daily operations. From the outside, everything should look exactly the same. And the former owner? He doesn't need to know who the ultimate buyer is, I replied. Not yet. Understood. Anything else? I looked out my apartment window toward my parents' neighborhood. Yes, I said slowly. Start looking for residential properties in San Diego. Something significant. How significant? The kind of house that makes a statement. The next morning, my father called again. "We're having a family lunch today," he said enthusiastically. "A celebration. New beginnings." New beginnings, I repeated. I like the sound of that. As I prepared for lunch, I caught my reflection in the mirror and smiled. My father believed he had sold his company to anonymous foreign investors. He had no idea he had actually sold it to his daughter. The daughter he had underestimated for 26 years. And I was only getting started. The celebration took place at the country club where my father had been a member for 15 years. Champagne flowed as we sat at their best table, the entire scene feeling strangely theatrical. I felt like I was watching a play where I already knew the ending, but the other actors didn't. "To smart business decisions," my father toasted, raising his glass. "And to William Kelly's legacy." He always said the shipping industry would evolve. Maybe selling to international investors is exactly what he would have wanted. "To Grandpa," I added quietly, "for teaching us how to recognize opportunities." Everyone drank. Ryan was already planning how to spend the money. "You should buy a yacht, Dad," he said enthusiastically. "Something nice for Florida." "Or you could reinvest wisely," I suggested casually. "Real estate markets are strong right now. Property values in prime locations tend to appreciate consistently." Olivia laughed and lifted her glass. "Listen to Cassandra giving investment advice." Next thing you know, Cassandra will be lecturing us about market timing and portfolio diversification. I smiled faintly. I might know a little about investment strategy. The conversation moved on around me, but I was only half listening. My phone had been buzzing all morning with updates from property managers and advisors across 3 continents. The Singapore resort acquisition was progressing faster than expected. The London commercial portfolio had appreciated 12% in just 6 months. My net worth was quietly approaching $3 billion. Meanwhile, my family was still celebrating my father's $45 million payday. After lunch, I drove past the offices of Pacific Horizon Shipping, my company now, though no one inside that building knew it yet. I parked across the street and watched employees coming and going. People who technically worked for me without realizing it. My phone rang. It was Sebastian Whitmore. "How are you feeling about your first major acquisition?" he asked. "Satisfied?" "More than I expected," I admitted. "I thought I might feel guilty, but mostly I feel vindicated." "No regrets about keeping your identity private?" "None," I said. "If they knew I was the buyer, they'd either demand favors or assume I was just playing with inherited money. This way they have to respect the deal for what it actually is." "And your next move?" I looked at the building again. The company my father had spent 3 decades building. The business my grandfather had once guided. "I think it's time to accelerate things," I said. "I want to buy a house." "Any particular house?" "The biggest, most impressive house in San Diego, something that makes people ask questions." Sebastian chuckled softly. "So you're ready to raise your profile?" "I'm ready to stop hiding." That afternoon, I contacted Diana Morgan, the most respected luxury real estate agent in San Diego. The moment I mentioned my budget range, her polite professionalism instantly shifted into focused attention. "Miss Kelly," she said carefully, "may I ask what industry you work in?" "International investments," I replied. "Real estate, hospitality, logistics. And you're planning to relocate to San Diego permanently?" "I'm considering it. I still have family here." We spent the afternoon touring properties that cost more than entire neighborhoods. $10 million estates with private theaters and underground wine cellars. $12 million mansions with guest houses larger than most family homes. A $15 million compound with its own private lake. Finally, Diana drove me through iron gates into the last property on the list. "This," she said proudly, "is the Silver Ridge Estate, 20 acres overlooking the city. The asking price is $24 million." The house was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the entire skyline. The architecture looked like something from an international design magazine. And from the master bedroom balcony, I could see the neighborhood where my parents lived. Perfect. "I'll take it," I said. Diana nearly dropped her tablet. "I'm sorry, the Silver Ridge Estate?" "I'd like to make an offer." "Don't you want time to think about it? Discuss financing? Review comparable sales?" "Cash purchase," I said calmly. "Full asking price. 2-week closing." She stared at me as if I had suddenly switched languages. "Miss Kelly, this is a $24 million property." "Yes," I replied. "I can do the math." I pulled out my phone and called one of my advisors. "David, I need a wire transfer for a real estate purchase. $24 million. As I dictated the banking details, Diana stood beside me silently, her entire understanding of who I was clearly collapsing. When I ended the call, she finally spoke again. "Miss Kelly, may I ask what exactly you do in international investments?" "I own things," I said simply. "Hotels, casinos, shipping companies, projects like that." That evening, I had dinner with my parents again in their modest kitchen, while my phone quietly confirmed the wire transfer for a house worth more than their entire inheritance. "How was your day?" my mother asked. "Productive," I replied. I looked at some real estate options. "Oh," she said, "thinking about upgrading from that apartment of yours?" "Something like that." My father was reading financial news on his tablet, still trying to process the sale of his company. "You know what's interesting?" he said after a moment. "The firm that bought Pacific Horizon Shipping has been acquiring other shipping companies along the West Coast. This wasn't random. It looks like part of a larger consolidation strategy." I kept my face neutral. "Maybe they see opportunities in the maritime industry others are missing." "Maybe," he said slowly, "but it makes me wonder if I sold too cheaply. If they're building a regional network, maybe the company was worth more than I thought." "You got an excellent price," I said calmly. "Don't second-guess a good decision." He nodded, though he still looked thoughtful. "Your grandfather always believed consolidation was coming to this industry," he said quietly. "Maybe these investors are the ones making it happen." If only he knew. His father's granddaughter was the investor. My phone buzzed with a message from Diana Morgan. "Wire received. Congratulations on your new estate." I smiled and slipped my phone back into my pocket. Tomorrow, I would begin moving into one of the most expensive homes in San Diego. It was time to stop being invisible. Moving day arrived exactly 2 weeks later. I hired the most exclusive relocation company in the city, the kind usually reserved for tech executives and celebrities. Massive moving trucks rolled through the iron gates of Silver Ridge Estate, while teams of uniformed movers carried in furniture I had ordered from Milan, artwork acquired in London, and the few personal belongings I had kept from my old apartment. Standing in the circular driveway, I directed the placement of a sculpture that cost more than most people's annual salaries. Then I called my mother. "I'm moving today," I told her. "Oh, that's wonderful, honey," she replied casually. "Did you find a bigger apartment?" "Something like that," I said. "You should come see it." "Of course. After your father finishes his conference call, we'll drive over. What's the address?" I gave her the Silver Ridge Estate address and ended the call. Then I waited. The property looked even more impressive with the movers unloading trucks across the driveway. When my phone rang again, it was my father. His voice sounded tense. "Cassandra, did you give your mother the wrong address?" "No," I said calmly. "Why?" "Because she's standing in front of Silver Ridge Estate. You know, the $24 million mansion that just sold to some mystery buyer." I glanced at my reflection in the towering glass windows of the house. "I'm not standing in front of it, Dad," I said quietly. "I'm inside it." Silence. "Cassandra," he said slowly, "that's not funny." "I'm not joking." Another long pause. We're driving up the driveway. From the grand foyer, I watched their modest sedan pull in behind one of the moving trucks. Through the tall windows, I could see them sitting inside the car, staring at the house as if it might vanish if they blinked. Eventually, they stepped out and walked toward the entrance, moving like people inside a dream. I opened the door. "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. Welcome to my new home." My mother's voice barely rose above a whisper. "Cassandra." They stepped inside cautiously. Their eyes moved across the marble floors, the enormous chandelier above the staircase, the sweeping balcony that curved through the second floor like something from a palace. My father finally spoke. "Cassandra, how exactly did you buy this house?" "I made an offer," I said simply. "They accepted." "For $24 million? 25, I corrected. There were other buyers. My mother grabbed his arm. "Honey, this isn't possible. You're a teacher. Teachers don't buy houses like this." "Former teacher," I said calmly. "I resigned yesterday." I walked them through the estate while their expressions shifted from disbelief to shock. Rooms larger than their entire living room. A kitchen lined with imported Italian marble. A private library with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A wine cellar filled with bottles worth more than their monthly mortgage payment. Finally, we stood in the master suite. From the balcony, their neighborhood could be seen far below. My father turned toward me. "Cassandra, you need to explain this right now." "Explain what?" "Where the money came from. What's really going on." I looked out over the city for a moment. "Do you remember Grandpa's envelope?" "The letter?" my father asked impatiently. "There's no way a letter explains this house." "It wasn't just a letter." "Well, then what was it?" "A plane ticket to Monaco," I said, turning back toward them, and a notification that my trust had been activated. They stared at me in confusion. "Grandpa created a trust for me when I was 16, I continued. "It became fully active on my 26th birthday. That was last month." My father slowly sat down on the edge of the bed. "That's impossible." "Grandpa spent years acquiring international assets and placing them inside that trust," I said. "Resorts, commercial properties, investment holdings across multiple countries." My mother's voice trembled. "How much are we talking about?" "As of yesterday's market close," I said calmly, "about $1.3 billion. The room fell completely silent. Finally, my father spoke again. "If that's true, if you really have that kind of wealth, why didn't you tell us?" A quiet laugh escaped me. "When exactly should I have told you?" I asked. "During the will reading, while everyone was laughing at my envelope? When Mom suggested Grandpa didn't love me enough to leave me anything? Or when you asked me to help organize your inheritance because I was good with computers?" "We didn't mean—" "Yes," I interrupted softly. "You did." My voice stayed calm, but years of hurt hardened every word. "You thought I was the leftover, the one who didn't matter, the one who got nothing." "Cassandra, we're sorry. For what?" I asked. "For finally seeing who I am?" My father straightened slowly, his business instincts returning.
"All right," he said carefully. "Let's discuss this logically. If you really control that level of wealth, there are family considerations, tax structures, trust management. We should talk about handling this responsibly."
And there it was, the real reason for his sudden concern. "Actually, Dad," I said, pulling out my phone, "there is something we should discuss." I opened an email and turned the screen toward him. "I acquired something recently that might interest you."
"What?"
"Pacific Horizon Shipping." His expression froze.
"You remember Aurora Strategic Holdings, the investment firm that bought your company?"
I smiled slightly. "That's one of my holding companies." The color drained from his face. You bought my company?" "For $45 million, I replied, which was actually a generous offer considering the debt load and the company's cash flow issues.
"Why would you do that?"
he asked. "Because I could. Because I wanted to. And because you sold it without even wondering if anyone in the family might want to keep it." My mother shook her head desperately.
"This is insane. You can't just buy your father's company."
"I can," I said calmly, and I did. It belongs to me now. My father's face cycled through emotions I had never seen before: shock, anger, confusion, and something dangerously close to fear. Finally, he said quietly, "Give it back."
"I'm sorry?"
"The company," he said. "Sell it back to me." I shook my head. "It's not for sale." "Cassandra," he said, his voice rising, "that company is my life's work." "Was your life's work," I corrected gently. "Now it's one of my investments." I moved toward the door. "I think you should both go home and take some time to process this," I said calmly. "We can talk again when you're ready for a real conversation." My father shook his head.
"We're not leaving until you explain how you're going to fix this."
I stopped and turned back toward them. "Fix what exactly?" I asked.
"I bought a company from a willing seller at an above-market price.
I purchased a house with my own money. Everything here is exactly where it's supposed to be." "Cassandra," my father's voice cracked slightly, "please." For a brief moment, looking at his face, I felt the old version of myself stir inside me. The Cassandra who hated conflict, the one who always tried to keep the peace, who would bend herself in half just to make everyone else comfortable. But then I remembered the laughter in the lawyer's office, the jokes about my envelope, the quiet certainty that I was the least important person in the room. "I'll see you both soon," I said gently. "When you're ready to treat me like family instead of like hired help." They left without another word. After the door closed, I stood alone in the massive entry hall of my new home, staring out at the view that had cost $25 million. My phone buzzed constantly. Congratulations from property managers, updates from financial advisors, invitations to meetings from business partners around the world. Yet for the first time since opening Grandpa's envelope, I felt completely alone. And surprisingly, it felt right. 3 days later, Ryan called. His voice sounded tight with anger and maybe something close to panic.
"What the hell is going on, Cassandra?"
"Good morning to you too," I replied.
"Don't play dumb. Mom and Dad told me everything. The house, the companies, you buying Dad's shipping business."
"Is any of that actually true?" I was sitting on my terrace with a cup of coffee that probably cost more per pound than Ryan earned in a week, watching the morning sunlight spill across the city below. "Which part are you asking about?" I said calmly.
"All of it."
"Are you really some secret billionaire?"
"I'm not exactly a secret anymore." "This is insane," he snapped. "How is any of this possible?"
"Grandpa believed in me more than you realized." He left you an envelope, Ryan argued. We all saw it. He left me an empire, I said. The envelope was just the notification. There was a long silence on the line. Finally, he said, "We need a family meeting. All of us. Tonight." We already had a family meeting, I reminded him. It was called the will reading. Remember how funny you all thought my inheritance was? That was before we knew. Before you knew I had money, I corrected. Amazing how that changes things. Cassandra, come on, he said impatiently. We're family. Are we? I asked quietly. Because for 26 years, family meant you got the spotlight while I got ignored. What's actually changed besides my bank account? Everything has changed, he insisted. You can't just buy Dad's company and move into a mansion and expect us to... To what? I interrupted. Treat me with basic respect? Include me in decisions? Stop assuming I'm worthless? I set my coffee cup down on the table. I'm not expecting anything from you anymore. I stopped doing that a long time ago. Ryan's tone hardened. Fine. If you want to play hardball, I'll call our lawyers. If Grandpa left you all that money through fraud or manipulation... I actually laughed. Ryan, I have the best legal team money can buy. They've already reviewed every detail of the trust. Do you really want to spend the next 5 years in court fighting a case you can't afford to win? You wouldn't. Try me. He hung up. Within the next hour, my phone rang repeatedly. First Olivia, then my mother, then my father. Each call followed the same pattern. Shock, anger, demands for explanations, threats about lawyers, and finally, awkward attempts to arrange a family meeting. I ignored them all. Instead, I spent the afternoon touring commercial real estate with Diana Morgan. If I was going to live in San Diego permanently, it made sense to start investing locally. That evening, I was in my wine cellar selecting a bottle for dinner when my security system chimed. The gate camera showed all 4 of them standing outside. My mother, my father, Ryan, Olivia. They looked less like a family and more like a small intervention team. I pressed the intercom button. Can I help you? Cassandra, it's your family. My mother's voice crackled through the speaker. We need to talk. Did you make an appointment? Cassandra, don't be ridiculous, she snapped. We're your family. The family that laughed at me, dismissed me, and threatened lawsuits this morning? I said evenly. That family? Please, my father said, stepping closer to the camera. Let us in. We can work this out. For a moment, I considered it. The old part of me, the one that always wanted their approval, wanted to open the gate immediately and try to repair everything. But the new part of me knew better. I'll make you a deal, I said finally. You can come in, but we do this my way. Silence on the intercom. You listen without interrupting. You don't make demands. You don't threaten me. And you acknowledge that everything I own is legally mine through a trust my grandfather created. Another long pause. Otherwise, you can go home, I continued, and we'll talk later, when you're ready to behave like adults. Finally, my father spoke. All right, your way. I opened the gates. I waited in the foyer as their car rolled slowly up the circular driveway. When they stepped inside, I saw them trying not to stare at the marble floors, the chandelier, the sweeping staircase that dominated the entrance hall. I led them into the living room, where the floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city lights beginning to glow in the evening. I took the armchair opposite the sofa. They sat together like defendants waiting for judgment. So, I said, crossing my legs calmly, what did you want to discuss? My father cleared his throat. Cassandra, we owe you an apology. For what, exactly? I asked. He hesitated. For not understanding the situation with your inheritance. That's not what you need to apologize for, I said calmly. My father frowned. What do you mean? You're apologizing because you misjudged my inheritance, I explained. You're not apologizing for the way you treated me. My mother leaned forward on the sofa. Honey, we never treated you badly. We love you. Do you? I asked quietly, because that's not what I felt during the will reading. Love doesn't look like asking me to handle administrative work while you planned how to spend millions. Love doesn't sound like laughing when someone suggests Grandpa didn't care about me. We were shocked, Olivia said defensively. We didn't handle it well. You handled it exactly the way you've always handled things involving me, I replied. You assumed I was less important, less capable, less deserving. Ryan had been silent until that moment. All right, he muttered. Fine. We screwed up. We're sorry. But Cassandra, you bought Dad's company. That's not exactly normal family behavior. Normal family behavior? I repeated. Normal family behavior would have been asking whether I wanted to be involved before selling it to strangers. Normal family behavior would have included me in conversations about Grandpa's legacy. Normal family behavior would have treated me like I mattered. So this is revenge? My father asked. No, I said simply. This is business. I stood and walked to the window, looking out across the city lights stretching toward the horizon. I bought a profitable company from a willing seller at a fair price. I moved into a house I can easily afford. For the first time in my life, I'm living on my own terms. My mother spoke softly. What do you want from us? I turned back to face them. I want you to understand something very clearly. The Cassandra you overlooked for 26 years doesn't exist anymore. Cassandra, the businesswoman, does. And she doesn't need your approval, your permission, or your validation. My father's voice dropped. I need that company back, he said quietly. It's my legacy. Everything I've built. Then you shouldn't have sold it. I didn't know you were interested. You never asked. Silence filled the room. Outside, the city stretched endlessly beneath us. Inside, my family sat with the uncomfortable truth that the balance of power had shifted permanently. Finally, I spoke again. There is one thing you can do. All four of them looked up at once. I want a public acknowledgement, I said, from each of you. Public? Olivia repeated. Yes, acknowledging how you treated me at the will reading, the assumptions you made, the disrespect you showed. Ryan frowned. That would be humiliating. Exactly, I said. Now you understand how I felt. My father spoke carefully. And if we do this, will you consider selling the company back to me? I smiled, though there was no warmth behind it. I'll consider it. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't even a yes. But it was hope. And hope can be the most powerful currency in the world. A week later, the public acknowledgments began appearing. My father's statement was published in the business section of the San Diego Tribune. Michael Kelly acknowledges that he significantly underestimated his daughter Cassandra Kelly's business abilities and financial position. Miss Kelly has proven herself to be a highly capable investor and business leader, and I regret any dismissive remarks I made regarding her capabilities. My mother posted her apology on Facebook. I want to publicly apologize to my daughter Cassandra for comments I made suggesting her grandfather didn't care about her. I was completely wrong. Cassandra is an accomplished businesswoman who deserves respect and recognition. Ryan and Olivia posted shorter statements on Instagram, but the meaning was clear. They had misjudged me. The posts quickly attracted attention. Local business journalists started asking questions about the mysterious Cassandra Kelly, the young woman who had quietly emerged as a major investor in the region. My phone filled with interview requests. I declined them all. As for Pacific Horizon Shipping, I surprised everyone by keeping my father on as general manager. Same office, same responsibilities, same day-to-day operations. The only difference was that he now reported to a management firm that reported to a holding company, ultimately controlled by me. Neither of us missed the irony. But the real surprise came 6 months later. We were gathered at my parents' house for dinner, a meeting I had reluctantly agreed to attend. The atmosphere was noticeably different, more careful, more respectful, but also, strangely, more genuine than anything I remembered growing up. During dessert, my father spoke. "Cassandra, I need to tell you something about the company." I looked up from my glass of wine. "What about it?" He hesitated before continuing. "The new ownership structure? It's been incredible. Access to capital, being part of a larger shipping network, not worrying about debt anymore. It's allowed me to focus on running the business instead of fighting financial stress." "The employees seem happier too," I observed. "They are," he admitted. "Better job security, better benefits, real growth opportunities." He paused, then gave a small, honest smile. "I should have sold years ago, but I was too proud to admit I was in over my head." My mother watched the conversation between my father and me very carefully before speaking again. "Cassandra, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "When you bought the company, did you do it to hurt your father or to help him?" I thought about that for a moment. "Both," I admitted honestly. Part of me wanted him to understand what it feels like when major decisions are made without your input. But I also couldn't bear the idea of those employees losing their jobs if the company collapsed. "And now?" she asked softly. "Now it's just business," I said. "And as it turns out, very good business." Ryan, who had been unusually quiet throughout dinner, finally spoke. "Cassandra, I want to ask you something, and I want an honest answer." "Okay." "Are you happy?" he said. "I mean, truly happy. With all this money, all this power, this whole new life." I considered the question carefully. "I'm content," I said. "For the first time in my life, I'm exactly where I want to be. I'm doing what I love, surrounded by people who see me for who I really am." Olivia leaned forward. "And where do we fit into that new life?" "That depends on you," I replied calmly. "I'm not the same person who sat at this table 6 months ago hoping for your approval. I don't need you to like me anymore, but I'd like to build a real relationship if you're willing to get to know the person I've actually become." My father leaned forward slowly. "Cassandra, I know I probably don't have the right to ask this, but would you teach me?" "Teach you what?" "How to think about business the way your grandfather did," he said. "Strategically. I spent 30 years running a company, but watching how you've handled everything, I realized there's a lot I never understood." I smiled, and this time, the smile was genuine. "I'd like that, Dad." Later that evening, as I drove back to Silver Ridge Estate, I called Sebastian Whitmore. "So," he asked, "how are you adjusting to the new family dynamic?" "Different," I said. "Better, I think. Definitely more honest. And personally, are you satisfied with the choices you've made?" I pulled into the circular driveway and looked up at the house that had marked the beginning of this entire transformation. "I'm proud of who I've become." There was a pause. "Your grandfather would be proud as well," Sebastian said quietly. "I hope so. I imagine he would especially appreciate the chess analogy." I laughed softly. Sometimes you have to sacrifice pieces to win the game. And have you won? He asked. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The same face I had always had, but somehow stronger, more confident, more certain of who I was. I won something better than the game, I said. I won myself. 1 year later, I stood on the deck of my yacht, Horizon, watching the skyline of San Diego slide past as we cruised along the coastline. It wasn't the largest yacht in the harbor, but it was perfect for what I needed. A place to host business partners, gather family, or occasionally escape the constant demands of managing a global empire. The past year had transformed my life in ways I never could have imagined. The public acknowledgments from my family had unexpectedly opened doors. San Diego's business community had welcomed me as a serious investor, and new opportunities appeared almost weekly. By the end of the year, I owned controlling stakes in the city's largest hotel group, several residential developments, and a fast-growing technology company specializing in maritime logistics. My net worth had climbed to nearly $2 billion. But more importantly, I had become someone I genuinely respected. The yacht docked and my Tesla waited nearby, another practical luxury I had purchased simply because I could. That evening, the entire family gathered at my house for dinner. The monthly dinners had become a tradition now. For the first time in our lives, we talked with each other instead of performing for one another. "How's everything going at the shipping company?" I asked my father as we sat around the dining table. "Incredible," he said. "The integration with your other maritime holdings has opened routes we never could have accessed before. We're bidding on international contracts that would have been impossible under the old structure." "And the employees?" "They're happier than I've ever seen them. Job security, better benefits, they know they're part of something bigger now." My mother set down her wine glass and studied me thoughtfully. "Cassandra, can I ask you something I've been wondering for months?" "Of course." "Do you forgive us?" she asked quietly. "Not just tolerate us because we're family. Truly forgive us." I thought about that for a moment. "I've accepted who you are," I said, "and I understand why things happened the way they did. You weren't cruel. You were just blind to possibilities you'd never imagined." "That's not exactly an answer," she said gently. "Forgiveness suggests you did something to me," I replied. "But in a strange way, you actually did something for me." They looked at me in confusion. "Your dismissal forced me to find my own strength. Your assumptions pushed me to discover my own worth. If you had believed in me from the beginning, I might never have learned to believe in myself." Olivia leaned forward. "So you're saying you're grateful we treated you badly?" "I'm grateful for the journey it started," I said. "Grandpa could have simply handed me money. Instead, he gave me the chance to discover who I was before wealth changed the way people saw me." Ryan, who had been unusually quiet during dinner, finally spoke. "Cassandra, there's something I need to tell you." "What is it?" "I've been thinking about what you said about earning respect instead of expecting it," he admitted. "And I realized something uncomfortable." "What's that?" "I've never actually earned anything in my life," he said quietly. "Everything I've had came from inheritance or family connections." "And what are you planning to do about that?" I asked. He met my eyes. "I want to work," he said. "Really work. Not just show up at some position Dad arranged for me." Ryan hesitated for a moment before continuing. "Would you consider giving me a chance at one of your companies?" he asked. "I'd start at the bottom, work my way up, earn it." I studied his face carefully, looking for the old signs of entitlement. Instead, I saw something I had never seen in him before: humility. "I'd consider it," I said slowly. "But you'd start in the mailroom," Literally. And you'd be treated exactly like every other entry-level employee. That's all I'm asking for, he replied. After dinner, my father and I stepped out onto the terrace. The city stretched endlessly beneath us, millions of lights flickering across the night like distant stars. Cassandra, he said quietly, there's something I need you to know. What's that? I'm proud of you. I looked at him in surprise. Not because of the money, he continued. Not even because of the success. I'm proud of the person you've become. He paused before finishing. You're stronger than I ever was, smarter than I realized, and kinder than I probably deserved. Dad, let me finish, he said gently. Your grandfather saw something in you the rest of us missed. He trusted you with his legacy for a reason. And he structured everything the way he did because he knew you needed time to discover your own worth before the world tried to define it for you. My eyes filled with tears. Thank you, I whispered. No, he said. Thank you for giving us a chance to know the real you. For forgiving us when we didn't deserve it. Later that night, I sat in my home office reviewing reports from properties across the world. The Monaco resort was outperforming every projection. The Macau casino was preparing a major expansion. The Singapore property was considering construction of a second tower, and the London portfolio was exploring new, sustainable development projects. My phone chimed with an email from the director of my charitable foundation. The William Kelly Foundation for Educational Excellence had just approved its largest grant ever. $100 million dedicated to STEM programs for underfunded schools across the Pacific Northwest. Tomorrow, the news would show photographs of me presenting the grant, standing beside teachers and school administrators who believed, the way I did, that education could transform a child's future. I opened my laptop and began writing the press release. At the bottom, I added a short personal note. My grandfather taught me that the greatest gifts sometimes arrive in unexpected forms. Today, we pass that lesson forward to the next generation of dreamers and innovators. As I typed those words, I could almost hear his voice again. Sometimes the most overlooked person in the room is the one with the greatest potential to change everything. He had been right. For 26 years, I had been underestimated, ignored, and overlooked. But those experiences had taught me something priceless. Your true value is never determined by how others see you. It is determined by how you see yourself. Everything else is just circumstance. From my office window, I could see my parents' neighborhood in the distance. Small homes where families were probably finishing dinner or settling in for the night. They were good people. They had simply been wrong. And sometimes that difference matters. I glanced at my schedule for the next day. A board meeting for my Pacific Northwest hotel group. A conference call with investors in renewable energy, lunch with the mayor to discuss affordable housing initiatives. But first, I had coffee scheduled with Emily Hart, my former colleague from the school where I used to teach, and still my closest friend. We met once a month to talk about everything except business. It reminded me of the person I had been before I fully understood the person I could become. I closed my laptop and walked upstairs to the master bedroom, pausing beside the window that overlooked the city. 1 year ago, I had been a teacher who believed she had inherited nothing but an envelope. Tonight, I was a billionaire entrepreneur and philanthropist who had inherited something far more valuable than money: perspective. The wealth had changed my life, but the real transformation came from learning to value myself. As I prepared for bed, I thought about the students who would receive scholarships from my foundation. The kids who might feel overlooked or underestimated in their own lives. I hoped they would learn what I eventually did. Sometimes, the greatest gift you receive isn't money. It's the journey that teaches you your own worth. If there is one thing I want you to remember from my story, it's this. Never let other people decide your worth. For years, I was the quiet one in the corner of the room, the one everyone underestimated, the one they assumed would never matter. My family judged me by what they thought I had, not by who I actually was. But life has a strange way of revealing the truth when the time is right. What changed my life wasn't just money. It was the moment I realized I didn't need anyone's approval to believe in myself. True power comes from knowing your own value and standing confidently in it, even when others fail to see it. Sometimes the people who overlook you the most are the ones who unknowingly push you to grow stronger. So if you ever feel ignored, underestimated, or treated like you don't matter, remember this. Your future is not defined by someone else's opinion. The greatest inheritance you can ever claim is the belief in your own potential. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of a moment when you felt overlooked or underestimated, please take a second to support the channel. Tap the like button, share this story with someone who might need to hear it today, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story of resilience, justice, and unexpected triumph. And I'd truly love to hear from you. Have you ever been in a situation where people doubted you, ignored you, or assumed you would never succeed? How did you prove them wrong? Or how are you still fighting to show your true worth? Leave your story in the comments below. I read as many of them as I can, and your experiences might inspire someone else who is going through the same struggle. Remember, sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one with the greatest potential to change everything. Never let anyone convince you that you are less than you are. Thank you for listening, and I'll see
Wow. Oh my gosh. Eddie. Hydrate. Yeah, I got you. I'm hitting the wrong buttons here. We got a Tangier party. Thanks, Eddie. Oh my gosh, I can't see. Let's just drive. I wanted to check the damage after that. Let's drive while we got the party on the screen. I think that's fun. Let's go. Thank you so much. Oh my god. Look at that gorilla.
Exit right.
Carl Benz introduced the patent wagon 1886.